Captain Parker sat in the cockpit of Flight 219, her fingers tracing the controls as the engines hummed beneath her. Sunlight spilled across the tarmac, casting long shadows over the sleek fuselage. Passengers filed in below, their chatter a low hum that contrasted with the mechanical precision of pre-flight checks. His gaze flicked between the instrument panels, gauges, and weather monitor, noting the approaching storm front over the Rockies. She had flown in turbulence before, but today the air seemed heavier, charged, as if warning her of something extraordinary. Flight attendants moved down the aisles, offering smiles and reassurance, unaware of the subtle unease brewing in the captain's mind. Co-pilot Lieutenant Mark Hastings sat beside her, checking systems with practiced efficiency. "Storm picking up," he muttered, scanning the radar. Nodded, her jaw tight but her voice steady. "We've got a solid window to get out of Denver and climb above the first cells. Let's stay sharp." She took a slow breath, recalling the rigorous training that had brought her here. Every simulation, every emergency drill, every sleepless night at the Air National Guard had prepared her for moments like this. Yet there was an undeniable difference between a controlled scenario and 183 lives resting entirely on her decisions. She tightened her grip on the yoke, feeling a mix of anticipation and a calm, determined focus she had honed over years. Below, passengers settled into seats, some already anxious, others blissfully unaware of the gathering storm. A mother comforted a toddler while a businessman typed on his laptop, oblivious to the dark clouds approaching. Studied their faces briefly, letting the human element anchor her. These weren't numbers or statistics. They were individuals, each with families, dreams, and futures dependent on her skill. A profound sense of responsibility settled over her chest, not as a burden but as a purpose. The pre-flight briefing had been routine, yet the weather report gnawed at her. Lightning storms were scattered across the Rocky Mountain corridor, with turbulence likely escalating at cruising altitude. Ran through contingency plans in her mind, alternate airports, emergency landing strips, coordination with air traffic control, and the protocols for mid-flight evacuation. Every detail mattered, and her mind worked like a finely tuned machine, compartmentalizing worry into actionable steps. As the last passengers boarded, eyes met those of the flight attendants, exchanging subtle nods that carried trust and reassurance. They had flown under her command before, and they knew her composure was unshakable even under pressure. The weight of leadership was invisible but omnipresent, a quiet force that guided decisions before emergencies ever arose. His inner monologue shifted from technical checks to human connection. Keep them calm. Guide them safely. Every life matters. Finally, with engines at full power and systems checked, she pushed the throttle forward. The aircraft began its steady taxi down the runway, brakes releasing with a hiss, tires gripping the asphalt. Felt the familiar vibration of acceleration beneath her feet, a reminder of control, speed, and precision. Outside, the storm clouds swirled ominously, dark and relentless, yet her focus remained unbroken. Passengers looked out windows, noticing the first flashes of lightning in the distance. A murmur of curiosity and unease rippled through the cabin. His voice came over the intercom, calm and measured. "Good morning, everyone. This is your captain speaking. We're expecting a few bumps along the way, but I assure you, you're in good hands." She smiled briefly at the co-pilot, who returned it with silent affirmation. As the plane lifted off the runway, ascending toward the storm, his mind shifted seamlessly into flight mode. She checked instruments, monitored wind shear, and adjusted the ascent path. The world below shrank rapidly, mountains rising like jagged teeth through mist and shadow. She felt a thrill, calm yet alert, ready for whatever awaited above. The storm was coming, but Captain Parker was ready. The first raindrops pelted the windshield, tiny diamonds of water sliding and distorting the view of the Rockies below. Lightning crackled across the distant peaks, illuminating jagged cliffs and deep valleys. Parker's hands remained steady on the yoke, eyes scanning the radar and instruments for any sign of turbulence or electrical disturbance. "Storms intensifying faster than predicted," she murmured to herself, her voice calm but measured. Beside her, Lieutenant Mark Hastings adjusted the autopilot, watching work with a quiet admiration that mirrored the passengers' unwitting trust. A sudden jolt shook the aircraft violently. Oxygen masks did not deploy, but the overhead lights flickered as alarms blared across the cockpit. "Engine 1 is spiking, pressure dropping," Mark shouted, punching controls with trained precision. Gaze flickered to the instrument panel. Hydraulic pressure was fluctuating unpredictably. The storm had intensified into a violent system of turbulence and electrical surges. In an instant, the cabin erupted into panic. Screams, cries, and the rustle of passengers scrambling filled the space. His voice cut through the chaos like steel. "Everyone, please remain calm. Flight attendants, secure the cabin. We are experiencing turbulence, but we're trained for this. Follow my instructions." Her tone was firm, confident, unwavering. Panic faltered at her command. Crew members worked feverishly, fastening trays, assisting frightened passengers, and reinforcing calm. Eyes darted to the altimeter, noting sudden drops in altitude caused by rogue gusts. Every second demanded decisions that would mean life or death. She ran emergency simulations in her mind at lightning speed. Airports were too far to reach safely. Terrain below was rugged, the Rocky Mountains stretching like a spine of jagged rock and ice. Pulse raced, but outwardly she remained composed. She spoke into the radio, issuing emergency codes to air traffic control. "Mayday, Mayday, Flight 219. Engine failure, altitude loss, seeking immediate clearance for emergency landing." Her voice was calm, but each syllable carried the weight of urgency. Lightning struck perilously close, the flash reflecting off cockpit windows, illuminating focused expression. The passengers gasped and clutched their armrests. One mother whispered soothing words to her child, trying to mask her own fear. Studied the storm patterns, calculating wind drift, descent angles, and the safest potential landing sites. The mind of a pilot is methodical even in terror. She identified a remote valley below, its narrow clearing a sliver of hope amid jagged peaks and thick forests. It was risky, almost impossibly so, but it was the only option. She turned to Mark. "This is our only chance. Prepare for a forced landing. Keep the cabin informed. We do this right, we save everyone." The co-pilot nodded, eyes wide but resolute, executing her instructions with precision. Below, treetops whipped past the windows as the plane descended, wind buffeting the fuselage. Adjusted flaps monitored speed and controlled the angle of descent with unmatched skill. Every vibration, every shudder of the plane tested her reflexes and composure. In the cabin, screams rose and fell like a chaotic symphony. His calm voice anchored them. "Brace, brace, hands over heads, eyes forward." Passengers obeyed, some instinctively, others out of trust in the woman guiding the aircraft through the storm. The plane shuddered violently but remained centered, intuition and training intertwined. She was racing against nature itself, against the storm, against the impossible. Every choice mattered, every movement counted. 183 lives depended on her next decision. Parker's eyes narrowed as the valley clearing came into view, a fragile strip of land hugged by jagged peaks and dense forest. The plane shuddered under the storm's fury, but she maintained control, scanning for every rock, tree, and uneven patch. The choice was clear: attempt the landing or risk catastrophe in open air. There was no margin for error. One miscalculation could obliterate the aircraft and everyone on board. Every instinct, every hour of training screamed at her to trust her skill. She exhaled slowly, centering herself. This was it. Mark Hastings adjusted the throttles, following her lead without hesitation. "I've never seen conditions like this," he muttered, voice tight but steady. Didn't respond, words were unnecessary. They shared an unspoken understanding. The storm would not yield. She aligned the plane with the narrow clearing below, adjusting flaps and speed meticulously. Gusts buffeted the fuselage, tossing the aircraft like a leaf in a hurricane. Every shift of wind was a new obstacle, every flash of lightning a harsh reminder of the stakes. Below, the trees seemed to claw at the plane as if resisting its descent. Calculated the angle, remembering emergency protocols and previous simulations. But this was unlike anything in manuals or training exercises. Her mind raced in perfect clarity, evaluating the terrain, wind vectors, and plane integrity simultaneously. She called out instructions to the crew, maintaining calm authority despite the chaos. Cabin crew, prepare for impact. Secure the passengers. Brace positions now. Her voice was the tether to sanity, guiding them through terror. Passengers screamed and clutched their armrests, some praying, others silently crying. His gaze swept across the cabin via the small mirror. She caught the eyes of a young woman clutching her child and a man gripping his wife's hand. Their fear mirrored her own, yet she drew strength from it. This wasn't just a plane. It was a lifeboat carrying hopes, families, and dreams. Each life demanded her precision, her courage, and her unwavering focus. Failure was unthinkable. Lightning struck nearby, illuminating the valley below in stark white light. Adjusted the descent path, angling the plane to avoid a cluster of rocks while accounting for sudden wind shear. The fuselage groaned under the stress, a steel beast fighting nature. She visualized the landing like a precise equation: altitude, speed, angle, distance. Every variable mattered. She felt the surge of adrenaline but controlled it, converting fear into razor-sharp concentration. Mark glanced at her, eyes wide. "You really think we can make it?" he asked, voice tense, gave a firm nod. "We don't have a choice. Focus. Follow my lead." He obeyed, adjusting controls as she instructed. Around them, the plane pitched violently but maintained alignment. The valley widened slightly, revealing a patch of ground large enough for the wheels to touch. Hope flickered, but she didn't allow relief, only calculation and action. The cabin shuddered violently as the descent continued. Instructed passengers again. Brace, heads down, hands over heads, eyes forward. The coordinated response calmed some, but panic still rippled through the aisles. She adjusted thrust one final time, lowering the aircraft toward the jagged clearing. Sparks flew as landing gear scraped rocks, but the plane stayed intact. His heart pounded, but her hands remained steady, guiding the plane with precision, merging instinct and training into a singular, life-saving act. As the fuselage skimmed over the uneven terrain, knew every second counted. Trees loomed dangerously close, yet she maneuvered with unmatched skill, eyes locked on the strip below. She whispered to herself, a quiet prayer and affirmation: "We can do this. Everyone survives." With one final adjustment, the plane touched down, skidding slightly but holding firm. The impossible decision had been made, and courage was about to be tested in ways she had never imagined. The plane skidded across the rocky clearing, tires sparking against stones, fuselage groaning under the storm's assault. Parker's hands remained firm on the yoke, controlling every micro-movement with surgical precision. Around her, passengers screamed, some gripping, others clutching loved ones. The roar of engines, wind, and thunder merged into a chaotic symphony, yet she remained the eye of the storm. Her mind worked faster than the turbulence outside, calculating angles, speed, and momentum to keep the aircraft upright and on course. One misstep could spell disaster. Mark Hastings assisted, adjusting flaps and throttles its direction. "We're skidding toward the tree line," he shouted over the roar. Eyes darted forward. The tree line was perilously close, yet the strip of ground widened just enough. With a controlled series of micro-adjustments, she guided the plane, scraping branches and rocks but avoiding catastrophe. Sparks erupted as landing gear met uneven ground, yet every passenger seat remained intact. Relief flickered in her chest, but she didn't allow herself celebration. Her focus remained absolute. The aircraft finally slowed, shuddering to a stop on the rugged terrain. Silence fell, punctuated by the hiss of wind and rain. Exhaled, voice calm but commanding. Cabin crew checked the aisles. Passengers remained seated until instructed. Her words cut through residual panic like a lifeline. Crew members moved swiftly, assisting passengers to secure belts and prepare for evacuation. Mind raced, considering aftershock turbulence, potential fires, and structural integrity. Her priority remained clear. Every single life had to get out safely. Through the mirror, she saw passengers trembling but alive. Families hugged, tears streaking rain-soaked faces, while children clung to parents, sensing safety. Felt a surge of relief but masked it behind professional composure. Her training dictated action over emotion. She coordinated with the co-pilot and crew to ensure orderly disembarkation, moving down aisles with calm authority, reinforcing confidence even as fear lingered. One step at a time, follow instructions. "You're safe," she instructed repeatedly, her voice steady, grounding. Outside, emergency responders had arrived, lights flashing through the storm's gloom, guided the passengers toward safety, directing them with a mix of urgency and reassurance. Rain-slicked rocks and uneven ground threatened slips, but no one faltered under her careful guidance. She helped the last families from the fuselage, ensuring the elderly, injured, and frightened were assisted first. 183 lives had survived, a feat that many would call impossible. Mark approached, wiping rain from his brow. "Captain, we did it. Everyone's out," he said, voice tinged with awe, nodded silently, scanning the faces of survivors. Relief mingled with exhaustion, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She noticed the storm still raging, but the aircraft held and no lives had been lost. It was a miracle born of skill, training, and courage under pressure. Emergency personnel congratulated her and the crew, yet remained composed. Applause and gratitude washed over her, but she deflected personal recognition. Her thoughts stayed on the passengers, each heartbeat, each frightened glance now transformed into relief. The storm had tested her, but she had remained the anchor amid chaos. She finally allowed herself a quiet moment to breathe, leaning against the fuselage, eyes scanning the night sky. Despite the adrenaline fatiguing, knew the story was far from over. The rescue would make headlines, the military would take notice, and the world would soon recognize the precision and bravery that had saved 183 lives. Yet in that clearing under the pouring rain, her priority remained grounded, ensuring everyone was safe, calm, and accounted for. The impossible landing had succeeded, but the next challenge, recognition, reflection, and understanding the weight of her choices, was just beginning. High above the Rockies, a pair of F-22 Raptors cut through storm-laden skies, their engines roaring like controlled thunder. Pilots Lieutenant Commander Jason Morales and Captain Lena scanned radar screens, alerted to the emergency unfolding below. Their mission: intercept Flight 219, assess the situation, and provide any necessary escort. But as they approached the coordinates, a calm, unmistakable voice crackled over the radio. "Eagle 1, do you copy?" Morales froze mid-maneuver, eyes widening. Hands stilled on the controls. "Eagle 1? That's Parker," Morales whispered, disbelief in his tone. The call sign carried weight, legendary among elite Air National Guard pilots, whispered in training circles as a symbol of precision, calm, and unmatched skill. Morales exchanged a glance. Even seasoned fighter pilots knew the stories. Her daring maneuvers, her flawless record, the countless lives saved during high-risk missions. Hearing her call sign in real time made the impossible tangible. Voice remained steady, reporting status. Flight 219 on rough terrain landing. 183 passengers accounted for. Emergency teams en route. I'm assessing the aircraft for integrity and safe disembarkation. Calm, commanding, clear. Morales felt his chest tighten with awe, adjusted her throttle reflexively, instinctively respecting the woman guiding a commercial plane through a storm, all while handling a situation that would challenge the most elite of their fighter training scenarios. The Raptors maneuvered into position, approaching the valley from a safe distance to avoid turbulence and debris. Morales activated the comms again. "Eagle 1, this is Razor 2. We're on scene. Do you require assistance?" Paused for a moment, then replied with characteristic efficiency. "Negative. All passengers are evacuating safely. I will maintain perimeter until authorities arrive. Your presence is appreciated, Razor 2. Even in her measured response, the authority in her tone sent chills down both fighter pilots' spines. His fingers hovered over the radar controls. "She's not panicking, not even a little," she muttered. Morales nodded, unable to look away from the tiny plane below, streaked by rain and mud. "I've never seen anything like this. If anyone else attempted that landing, we wouldn't even be talking about it. Silence fell between them as they watched coordinate the evacuation, every movement precise, every command deliberate. Her calm in chaos was something they had only heard about in briefings and legends, but now it was real. Eyes scanned the valley as the last passengers moved toward emergency personnel. She assessed debris, checked for leaks, and ensured the injured were receiving attention. The F-22s circled above, not for protection but as silent witnesses to the extraordinary skill unfolding beneath them. Morales broke the silence. "We're watching history in real time," he said, voice low, reverent. Nodded, fists tight around the control stick, humbled by the human capability she was witnessing. News from the tower crackled, confirming the safe evacuation. Acknowledged, then coordinated final checks with the emergency teams. Her call sign, Eagle One, carried authority that transcended rank or circumstance. The fighter pilots realized that their admiration wasn't merely for skill but for composure under pressure, for courage, and for a rare ability to turn impossible odds into success. They flew above the valley, frozen in awe, watching the woman who had nature itself. As the storm began to subside, Morales and remained in formation, unwilling to break eye contact with the aircraft below. They had seen elite pilots before, but none with this level of calm precision under extreme pressure. Eagle One had landed in chaos, rescued 183 lives, and earned a quiet, instant reverence from those who operated in the most dangerous skis imaginable. Both fighter pilots knew this moment would be remembered long after the storm cleared, a testament to the extraordinary courage and skill of Captain Parker. By the time rain eased into a steady drizzle, emergency crews had the valley organized. Stretchers, fire trucks, and medical tents were positioned as paramedics assessed the passengers. Parker stepped out of the cockpit, drenched but composed, her flight suit clinging to her frame. She watched as crew and responders guided the survivors, ensuring each person was accounted for. Relief washed over her briefly, but she remained vigilant. The lives of 183 people had been saved, yet the responsibility still pressed on her shoulders like invisible weights. Reporters had begun arriving, cameras trained on her with bright lights cutting through the gray sky. "Captain Parker, can you walk us through what happened?" one shouted, smiled faintly, brushing raindrops from her brow. "The crew did an incredible job and the passengers remained calm. Every life mattered and we worked together to make sure everyone got out safely." Her voice was steady, commanding, but humbly deflected the focus from herself. She wanted the attention on the teamwork, not personal glory. Passengers were escorted into heated tents, wrapped in blankets. One man, tears streaking his face, clasped hands. "You saved my family," he said, voice cracking. A mother hugged her child tightly and whispered, "Thank you, Captain. Thank you for keeping us alive." His composure faltered for a fraction of a second, just enough to feel the human impact of her actions. Every training session, every drill, every mission she had flown culminated in this moment, and it was more profound than any report or medal. Military liaison officers approached, nodding with respect. "Captain Parker, the Air National Guard has been monitoring the situation. Your precision and leadership have been exemplary. This is the kind of skill and calm that sets a standard for all pilots." Nodded politely, acknowledging the praise without arrogance. She felt the mixture of exhaustion and pride, a tight knot of adrenaline that refused to unwind. She had been trained for emergencies, but nothing prepared her for seeing lives saved, faces of relief and gratitude etched into memory forever. Social media had already exploded. Photos of the aircraft in the storm, news snippets of the landing, and stories of calm heroism were shared nationwide. People called her a miracle pilot, while aviation enthusiasts analyzed the incredible landing in real time, watched from a distance, letting the recognition wash over her without internalizing it too heavily. Fame was fleeting, the weight of responsibility was lasting. She allowed herself only a quiet acknowledgement that she had acted correctly, decisively, and with heart. In a brief moment alone, stood at the edge of the clearing, rain dripping from her helmet and jacket. The storm clouds still swirled above, but the valley was calm. She reflected on the fear, the chaos, and the precision it took to keep panic at bay. Her thoughts drifted to every passenger, every crew member, and the invisible bonds forged in moments of crisis. Heroism, she realized, was not measured by accolades or headlines. It was measured by the lives preserved and the trust honored. Nearby, Mark Hastings approached, giving her a nod of quiet admiration. "Captain, you really did it. Every last one of them," he said softly, nodded, eyes scanning the valley one last time. "We did it together. That's what matters." Around them, emergency teams continued their work. Passengers whispered thanks, and even the storm seemed to have eased in recognition of what had just transpired. For Parker, the landing was over, but the reflection had just begun. She understood the full weight of her decisions, the ripple effect of courage, and the responsibility that came with skill. In that valley, amidst gratitude, media scrutiny, and the first hints of national recognition, she felt a profound truth. True heroism is silent, decisive, and deeply human. The weeks after the crash were a whirlwind Parker hadn't anticipated. News anchors replayed footage of Flight 219's landing repeatedly, while social media dissected every angle of the storm and the maneuver that saved 183 lives. At first, she appreciated the gratitude, but it quickly became overwhelming. Interviews, press conferences, and late-night segments blurred together. Each question tested her patience. How did you remain so calm? Did you ever fear for your life? Do you feel like a hero? Answered politely, but inside, exhaustion gnawed at her. Even in private, the adrenaline didn't fade. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by flashes of turbulence, screaming passengers, and lightning striking close to the aircraft. She relived every second of the descent, not in fear but in analysis. Could she have done anything differently? What if the plane had skidded a foot too far? Her mind replayed each detail like a relentless loop, mixing gratitude for survival with a gnawing sense of responsibility. Heroes were celebrated publicly, but internally, the weight of choice never eased. Investigators arrived next, methodical and thorough. They examined flight logs, engines, hydraulics, and cockpit voice recordings. Each question, each probe, reminded her that survival didn't erase accountability. Answered every query with professionalism and clarity, but some questions pierced deeper. Why did you choose that landing site? Did you consider alternative airports? What would have happened if the storm had worsened? She knew the answers instinctively, but verbalizing them underscored the reality. Heroism often walked hand in hand with scrutiny. Family and friends offered support, yet even comfort carried its own complexity. Her parents visited, eyes wide with pride and worry, reminding her that she carried not only professional responsibility but the emotional weight of personal bonds. Mark Hastings remained at her side, steadfast and calm, yet even he noticed the quiet tension behind her measured demeanor. Gratitude, admiration, and scrutiny coexisted in ways she hadn't experienced before. Public heroism brought attention, but private heroism, the act of carrying consequences and memories, remained invisible. Returned to the Air National Guard base to resume training, expecting a sense of normalcy. But the aftermath followed her there as well. Pilots she had flown with before now treated her with reverence bordering on awe, and new recruits studied her maneuvers as lessons in courage. The respect was genuine, but it was also a subtle reminder that she was no longer just a pilot. She was a standard, a symbol, a benchmark. Each flight became a test. Could she live up to the expectation that she had set? Even small moments carried weight. A casual conversation about flight paths or weather conditions sparked internal reflection, replaying the storm and the passenger's terror. She realized that heroism was a paradox, simultaneously exhilarating and isolating. People celebrated the result, the lives saved, the landing performed against impossible odds, but no one could inhabit the cockpit, feel the controls beneath their hands, or process the milliseconds that separated survival from disaster. That truth stayed with her quietly, shaping how she approached each subsequent flight. At night, sometimes wandered the runway alone, the lights cutting through darkness like quiet sentinels. She remembered every passenger, every crew member, every tremor of the aircraft during descent. Gratitude mingled with responsibility, and she understood the weight of leadership, the burden of decisions no one else could make. In that quiet, she acknowledged a profound lesson. Heroism is rarely simple or comfortable. It is measured not only by results, but by endurance, reflection, and the courage to carry what others cannot. By the end of the month, had learned to navigate public scrutiny, professional expectations, and her own internal reckoning. She knew the world would remember the landing, the number of lives saved, the story itself. But she also knew that her true challenge was unseen, processing the storm within, honoring the trust placed in her, and preparing for the next moment when skill, courage, and calm could mean the difference between life and death. Weeks turned into months, yet Captain Parker's landing of Flight 219 remained etched in the national consciousness. News outlets highlighted her composure, interviews chronicled her calm decisiveness, and social media buzzed with admiration. Yet herself remained grounded, aware that recognition, while meaningful, was secondary to the lives she had saved. She returned to the Air National Guard base, her routine unchanged, training, flying, and mentoring, carrying the quiet weight of heroism alongside her unassuming determination. At the base, F-22 pilots Jason Morales and Lena approached her during a training exercise, saluting with respect. "Captain Parker," Morales said, voice tinged with awe, "seeing your landing in real time, we still can't believe it. That calm, that precision, it's something we'll never forget." Nodded. "You didn't just save lives. You reminded all of us what excellence under pressure looks like." Smiled, acknowledging their respect with quiet gratitude, yet deflecting attention to her crew. Letters and messages from passengers arrived daily. Children drew pictures of planes soaring above mountains. Mothers recounted how her voice had calmed terrified children, and survivors described her presence as a life raft amid chaos. She read each note silently, feeling a deep, personal satisfaction. The gratitude was humbling. Each story reinforced the profound impact a single act of courage could have. For these letters were more meaningful than awards or headlines. They were reminders that heroism had ripple effects far beyond the cockpit. The Air National Guard honored her formally at a ceremony, recognizing not just her skill but her leadership under unprecedented conditions. Colleagues, trainees, and commanders alike paid tribute, applauding her calm, strategic thinking and humanity. Stood tall, accepting acknowledgement with quiet grace. Yet in her mind she reflected on the storm, the passengers' eyes, the tremors of the aircraft, and the fleeting seconds when life hung in the balance. She realized heroism was less about accolades and more about living with the responsibility of choices that shaped lives. In quiet moments, visited families who had been on Flight 219. She spoke softly, asking about recovery, hearing stories of resilience and newfound gratitude. She saw firsthand how her actions inspired courage beyond the cockpit, children considering aviation, adults volunteering, people appreciating life's fragility and potential for selflessness. Understood then that heroism wasn't a singular event. It was a living, breathing influence, spreading quietly through the lives she touched. She continued her work, mentoring young pilots, sharing lessons of composure under pressure, precision, and empathy. "Skill alone isn't enough," she told them. "You need courage, clarity, and care. You are responsible for those in your charge, and that responsibility never ends, even after landing." Her words resonated, shaping the next generation of aviators who would carry her example forward in skies both calm and stormy. Years later, reflected on Flight 219. The storm, the impossible landing, and the 183 lives saved remained vivid in her memory. Yet she also remembered the unseen struggles, the sleepless nights, the internal reckoning, and the quiet moments of reflection that defined heroism as much as the act itself. Courage, she realized, was as much about persistence and humility as it was about skill. As she gazed at the runway at sunset, the mountains silhouetted against amber skies, felt a profound sense of peace. She had faced the storm, guided lives to safety, and inspired others in ways she might never fully comprehend. The F-22 pilot's respect, the passengers' gratitude, and the nation's admiration were lasting testaments, but her true legacy lay in demonstrating that one person, guided by skill, courage, and heart, could turn the impossible into reality. Captain Parker had not just saved 183 lives. She had shown the nation what heroism truly meant: quiet, decisive, and enduring. And in that moment, she knew the story wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone whose lives she had touched, a living inspiration to face challenges with unwavering courage.